I managed to really memorize the features of the man that was actually the rapist and in the room with us.
Fran Drescher not only survived rape, she helped bring her attacker to justice. The lessons she learned from that ordeal helped her cope with another trauma. The actress was diagnosed with uterine cancer, but 2 years after she began feeling symptoms.
You have to be able to transform from being a patient into a medical consumer. The very word patient implies passivity.
The cancer struck as her marriage to a gay man was ending.
The marriage was, busted apart. And I was just very unhappy. It was like a perfect storm.
Best known for her role as the nanny, Drescher talks about her lucky break on an airplane with an executive that led to the Emmy Award-winning show.
He was a captive audience. Where was he going to go, Coach?
And now, her first role on Broadway, starring as the Wicked Stepmother in Cinderella, a character she's reinvented.
This is the first character that I've ever played that really is kind of a mean character. I'm usually like the hooker with the heart of gold.
I spoke to Fran Drescher right before she went on stage in New York.
You have said that your life has been about turning negatives into positives, and you survived what had to have been one of the worst experiences that any woman could go through. You have told the story about you and your best friend being in your apartment, two brothers breaking into your apartment. They raped both of you, and your husband at the time, Peter, witnessed this. And those two men are in prison now. And what you said in an interview to Larry King was, with the rape, I became a deeper, more compassionate person. I became a better actor. How so?
Well, I'm fortunate that I'm a creative person, so I can take my pain and funnel those feelings into my work. And, when something really horrific like that happens to you, you can use it as an actor, and it deepens you as a human being. You become more sympathetic and empathic to other people's pain. And, such was the case for me. And so, I was able to use it in my acting, and also to turn my pain into purpose and become someone that uses my life experience as well as my celebrity for the greater good.
A number that you probably already know this number, but out of every 100 rapes, only about 40 are reported. And only about 3 rapists ever serve a day in jail. But you did get justice, as I said. Can you talk about what the process was like for you to actually get justice, whatever that may mean for you?
Well, by, really a great coincidence or divine intervention, I happened to be watching a morning talk show the week before. And one of the guests was a detective that was talking about how witnesses or victims make the worst witnesses because they're usually so frightened that they don't pick up on the details that would help, the police find and apprehend the assailant. And I remembered that interview that very night when we were held hostage at gunpoint. And so I managed to really memorize the features of the man that was actually the rapist and in the room with us. And so afterwards, when it was time to speak to the police artist, I was the one that did it because I happen to have a photographic memory. And when it was done, it looked like he had posed for it. And there had been so many things going on in my area that the police department for that community got funding to have a 3-night stakeout. And if he hadn't re-entered the neighborhood in those 3 nights, they might not have ever caught him. But he actually took my car. And so the car was found in a neighborhood in Los Angeles. And on the last night of the stakeout, they had these unmarked cars on different corners with plainclothesmen. And they saw a car sitting in front with the motor running with plates from where they found my car. So one detective called another and said, I'm looking at a suspicious car. There was a woman sitting behind the steering wheel. And then the man, the rapist, got into the car and they started following him. And just before he got onto the freeway, which was only a few blocks away from where I was living at the time, they pulled the car over. And he said, I didn't do anything, but his fly was still unzipped. And there was some poor woman's jewels hanging out of his pocket. And they had the picture. And, you know, they looked at him and they looked at the picture and they said, this is you. You're under arrest. And, you know, it ended up, we got the call that they had apprehended someone, and we were to go down to the police station, and they had like 3 school buses filled with witnesses and victims. And he was on parole at the time. And he said that he was on a rampage, and he was. And so he got, you know, like 150 years, so he'll never be out of prison and he'll never be up for parole.
Think about how many people you saved.
Well, you know, bad things happen to good people. I speak openly about it because I think that it's important for victims to know that, you know, you can move on with your life. I mean, it may take you a little while. It took me like a good year before I stopped feeling like a shattered mirror reflection of myself. But, you know, eventually you pull yourself up and you start all over again, and it becomes like a new normal. Never what it was before, but, you know, whatever. It is what it is. You have to play the hand that is dealt you. And no one leaves this planet unscathed, so, you know, you just deal.
Do you deal with pain by using humor?
I guess so, because, you know, when I wrote, I'm a cancer survivor also, and when I wrote my book, Cancer Schmancer, it took me 4 drafts to find my comedy voice that at that point I was already famous, people knew who I was, but it was a very cathartic experience because I had to keep reflecting back and expel my bitterness and anguish and start remembering everything else that was happening and reflect on the life lessons that were gained by it and the ways that my life actually improved as a result of my survival. And that side by side with pain lies joy, always. And so, you know, when you're grief-stricken, you have to trust that there's something right there next to you that's joyful. And it takes a little bit of effort, but it's there, and it behooves you to find it, to seek it out and look for it. Because, you know, when something bad happens, it is a slice of the pie, and you can easily make it consume you, eat you up alive. And it's very hard to climb out of that pit. But if you really, you know, understand that it's not only just a slice of the whole pie of your life, but it's an opportunity for you to become a more refined version of yourself. So, that's what I set forth to do once I was diagnosed with cancer, because I had already been in extensive therapy as a result of the rape. And the series, The Nanny, I wasn't totally happy with myself and my marriage.
Even with all that success.
Right. So I knew something was wrong, because I had reached my strive. I had a beautiful home. I had a husband that loved me, but something was wrong. And, when you scratch just beneath the surface, I hadn't fully dealt with the pain that I felt from the rape. I was already experiencing symptoms of gynecologic cancer, but was going undiagnosed. I was misdiagnosed.
Took 2 years to
For
get
2
the
years
right
and 8
diagnosis.
doctors. When the series ended, which was fortuitous because the next year I was diagnosed. So this was like the last season of The Nanny. I wasn't feeling well. The marriage was, busted apart. And I was just very unhappy. But, there are so many, it was like a perfect storm. From the gynecologic cancer and the treatment of hormones to treat a benign condition that I never had. That was making me kind of wacky. And the pressure of the show and the marriage and confronting I wasn't really in touch with myself and my need to always be perfect, the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect star, the perfect human being, everybody's caregiver, never a taker, only a giver.
What so many women feel.
And, I think I hit a brick wall and had like a classic garden variety midlife crisis, which over the course of the years that followed, my cancer was diagnosed. Peter and I divorced, but then he came out, which was such a relief to me because
How so?
I felt guilty that I left him because I'd never really done anything like that for myself at the expense of someone else. I totally lived for everyone else's happiness. And even to this day, I have to really, pat myself on the back. That was good, Fran, It's good that you put yourself into the equation. It's okay that you said, that's not going to work for you. But it's has been a journey. And so, Peter and I are the dearest of friends. And we've come out the other side, and that was one of the silver linings of being diagnosed with cancer. Because he called, when he got the call that I had cancer, he was living in New York. He could not get far enough away from me. I was still in LA. And he burst into tears. And in that moment, all of his anger melted away, and all that was left was the love. And he wanted to come and be with me, but I was already in love with someone else. And he was totally there for me. And he slept on a cot in the hospital and quit his job and moved in with me and took care of me. And, we're still good friends. And, and now I'm, madly in love with someone that accepts all of these past relationships and the good people that these men are, and that we still share a loving friendship with each other, even though they were never the one, and this gentleman is.
Your next book should be How to Be Friends with Your Exes. You should-
Yeah, happily divorced.
Exactly, exactly. You are a health advocate, particularly for women. Can you talk a little bit more about what the really difficult process you went through of finally being properly diagnosed? What can women learn from what you went through?
You have to be able to transform from being a patient into a medical consumer. The very word patient implies passivity. You cannot let yourself be intimidated by the doctor if they don't give you the time that you need, if they're not respectful that you want a second opinion, you're not with the right doctor. Always, when you suspect there's something seriously wrong, always go with somebody that's not going to fall apart or you have to worry about how they're handling this news, but they're actually going to be the strong ones. And they're going to ask the doctor how to spell things. You must be proactive. You have to gather your posse around you of strong and empowered people that are going to take the news, get out there and do some research, figure out what's available. Who are the doctors that are leading in this field? And then most people know someone that they can call to find out who they know. Can you get me into this doctor? Is there someone that can help me? And you put one foot in front of the other and you forge ahead. And and on our website, cancerschmancer.org, I give at least 18 tips on what to do when you think there's something seriously wrong with you.
Coming up on Talk to Al Jazeera, Fran Drescher tells us about the work she's best known for, The Nanny.
Only on Al Jazeera America.
I lived that character.
Go one-on-one with America's movers and shakers.
We will be able to see change.
Gripping, inspiring, entertaining. No topic off limits.
And I'm like, Dad, there are hookers in this house.
Exclusive conversations you won't find anywhere else.
These are very vivid human stories. If you have an agenda with people, you sometimes don't see the truth.
To watch new episodes of Talk to Al Jazeera, check your local listings or visit aljazeera.com.
I'm Rochelle Carey. This is Talk to Al Jazeera. My guest this week, actress Fran Drescher. She's currently starring in Cinderella on Broadway. Let's talk about The Nanny. So, 20 years ago, the New York Times had this headline that says, Mary Poppins, she's not. As if they were surprised that your show was a hit. And in that same article, it talks about this encounter that you had on a plane. Remember this, with the president of CBS, and this is the quote. He says, you said this to him, people don't understand. Because of the voice, they think I'm the seasoning in the show. That's wrong. I'm a main course. One day, somebody is going to see that. One network is going to get lucky. So you saw him on a plane, you ran to the bathroom, you put on makeup, and you sat down and you sold yourself to him.
Yeah.
Is that how this went?
Well, he was a fan of mine. I had already done a short-lived series, and then I did another pilot. I had worked for the network, CBS, several times, but nothing really flew. And he said to me, we have a lot of pilot scripts that we've green-lighted. I'm sure there's going to be something for you. And I said, nothing's going to fit me hand in glove because I'm too offbeat. And you have to listen to the ideas that me and Peter have. And so he was a captive audience. Where was he going to go, Coach? So 9.5 hours later, as we pulled into Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, he said, okay, when we get back to LA, call me up and I'll set you up a meeting with our development person. And I didn't really have the nanny idea in my head at the time, but I ended up with going to my girlfriend's house in the south of France, which was where I was connecting to, and she forgot to mention that she was going to be there with her 2 screaming toddlers. And I thought I would lose my mind. And Peter said Twiggy, the one and only, had called and invited me to visit her and her family in London. So I said to my girlfriend in France, I have to get out of here. I love you, but this is no vacation. And I went to visit Twiggy and her family in London. Well, she and her husband were busy working, so I started taking their little 12-year-old schoolgirl all over London with me. And she was just a proper little British schoolgirl. And she's walking around and she said, "Oh, Fran, my new shoes are hurting me." And I'm thinking, what is this? She wants me to take her home? And I said, "Honey, step on the backs of them." And she said, "Won't that break them?" And I said, "Break them in." And I thought to myself, oh, this is such a funny relationship, because I'm not telling her what's good for her, I'm telling her what's good for me. And the whole night, when I went to bed, 5 o'clock in the morning, it was still early in LA because it was 8 hours earlier. So I called Peter and I said, I think I have the idea that we should pitch to Jeff. And I said, what do you think about a spin on The Sound of Music? Only instead of Julie Andrews, I come to the door. And he thought for just a moment, and he has an excellent sense of these things, and he said, that's it, that's the show we're going to develop and pitch. And that was the beginning of The Nanny.
Your career is more than one role. You're on Broadway right now, playing the Wicked Stepmother. Why that role?
This is the first character that I've ever played that really is kind of a mean character. I'm usually like the hooker with the heart of gold. And I was really worried at first. Even during rehearsal, I was thinking, I can't say these things. It's so awful, and everybody's going to hate me. But slowly but surely through the rehearsal process, I reinvented the character. I made her very glamorous and self-absorbed and very fun to watch, and really someone that you love to hate. And then, she kind of comes around in the end and softens a bit. So, she's not the same through the whole show. She grows. And I was just so thrilled to be offered, a role in a Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, because I'm not really a singer. And this role happens to be the biggest speaking part and the smallest singing part. And to be on Broadway in such a classic tale in a Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, it's just phenomenal. And I'm having such a large experience. It's one of the great highlights in my career.
So is it actually fun getting to be the mean person?
Oh, it's so fun. It's fun at the end, when the audience is so grateful with their applause as well. So I know that I'm faring well out there, and I'm helping the show, sell tickets and things, and that's all marvelous because it's such a great company and it's such a beautiful production, and the music is so clever and funny and smart and sweeping and romantic. And the new book for the story is really updated, and so the role of Cinderella is she grows into a very confident young woman who knows what she wants from her life, and it's the prince really that's kind of lost and misguided in search of a strong woman to help him realize his true potential. And so I'm very happy to be part of this interpretation, because the role, the female lead, is a much stronger role model than the original grim fairy tale. I've always loved Broadway. In fact, when we were creating The Nanny, we made Mr. Sheffield a Broadway producer to pay homage to the Broadway stage and the Great White Way, and to kind of tip our hats to that, because the show took place in New York, but we were shooting it in California. And so we felt like, what's definitive Manhattan experience? And of course, it had to be Broadway.
Still ahead, find out about Fran Drescher's next project.
Protesters are gathering
There's an
again.
air of tension right now.
Chanting for democracy. This is another significant development.
We have an exclusive story tonight, and we go live.
What's next on your agenda?
I'm involved in the development of another Broadway show that I can't speak about yet, but it's going to be thrilling.
Nobody's listening. You can just tell me. Just tell me. No?
That's as much as I can say, but it is going to be a big deal.
How grueling of a schedule is it to pull off a Broadway show?
Well, as one of the stars, which is what I'm doing now, it's the hardest thing I've ever done, and I'm a hard worker. I usually wear several hats in almost everything I do. But this, you can't really do anything else, because for 2 solid hours, you're putting out a tremendous amount of energy to keep that audience engaged and reach out to that back row way up in the balcony.
Well, we know how busy you are, so we appreciate your time.
Thank you.